Today, we're going to deconstruct one of the most basic skills we think we have, reading. We're diving into the first chapter of Peter Johnston's really foundational 1983 work to tackle a question that is way, way more complex than it sounds, and it's one that has kept researchers busy for decades.
So let's just jump right in, shall we? What is reading comprehension? I mean, it's something we do every single day. We test for it in schools constantly. But can we actually pin down what it is? It seems so simple, right? But as we're about to see, this exact question has been a huge sticking point for a very long time. In fact, trying to define reading comprehension isn't just some headache for teachers. Johnston points out that it's actually one of psychology's oldest and, frankly, most stubborn problems. The hunt for a single, clean, universally accepted definition, yeah, it's been incredibly elusive. So let's start putting the pieces of this puzzle together. Why is a concept that we use so casually every day so ridiculously hard to pin down in an academic way? Well, the answer really lies in some pretty deep disagreements about what's actually happening inside our brains when we read a page. And look, this isn't just about academics arguing in an ivory tower. The fact that we haven't had a solid, shared definition has fueled decades of real arguments. Arguments about how to study reading, how to teach it, and, this is the big one for Johnston's work, how to even assess it. To really get where we are now, we've got to go back and look at the historical fault lines. Johnston lays out these two huge foundational debates that basically split the field for years. Okay, so first up, you've got the battle between process and product. Think about it. Should we define comprehension by the journey, the real-time mental acrobatics your brain is doing while you're reading? Or should we define it by the destination, the final understanding you walk away with? Is it about the how or the what? The second big debate was this. Is comprehension just one single, indivisible skill? You either get it or you don't. Or is it actually a bunch of separate little sub-skills that we can break apart and teach one by one, like finding the main idea or understanding vocabulary? As you can imagine, these two arguments created a ton of tension. But then, as Johnston explains, something big happened. A major shift in thinking started to take hold, moving away from these rigid either-or debates and toward a much more dynamic model that put the reader front and center. This quote from Pearson and Johnson just nails the new way of thinking. They said that comprehension isn't about just sucking meaning out of a text. No, it's an act of connection. It's about building a bridge between the new stuff on the page and the huge web of knowledge you already have in your head. And this, right here, is the crucial takeaway. This is the big paradigm shift. The reader is not a passive sponge, just soaking up words. Not at all. The reader is an active participant. You're a co-creator of the text's meaning. You bring your whole life, your experiences, your knowledge to the page. Okay, so if we're all active creators, then what's our main tool? What's the cognitive engine that powers this whole process? Well, it's the incredibly powerful act of making inferences. At its core, an inference is basically an educated guess. It's the magic trick your brain performs when it takes the words the author gives you, mashes them up with what you already know about the world, and fills in all the blanks. You see, authors can't possibly state every single detail, so they have to rely on us, the readers, to connect the dots. Johnston points out two key types of this mental work. First, there's a slot filling. That's when you use your general knowledge of the world to fill in the expected details of a scene. Then there's text connecting, which is all about making links between different parts of the text itself, like figuring out who he is or understanding cause and effect. The book gives a perfect example of slot filling. If you read the sentence, "James went to the airport," your brain doesn't just stop there. It instantly pulls up its airport file and starts filling in these mental slots. You automatically picture taxis, luggage, security lines, airplanes, all stuff that was never mentioned but is part of that mental picture. That's slot filling. So what's the end goal of all this active processing and constant inferencing? It's not just about collecting a list of facts from the page. The ultimate goal is to build a complete, coherent mental world based on the text. So here's how this new model works step by step. First, you grab the explicit clues the author gives you in the text. Then, you mix those clues with your own background knowledge. After that, you use inferences to fill in all the gaps and connect the ideas. And finally, from all of that, you build this rich, coherent mental model of what the text actually means. And here is the truly brilliant part. This whole idea of a mental model doesn't pick a side in those old debates, it actually resolves them. Reading comprehension is now seen as a process, the active building that creates a product, that mental model. And that process uses a whole toolkit of divisible skills, like inferencing, that all work together. It's not either or anymore. It's all of the above.
It's really worth remembering that when Johnston published this back in '83, this was a huge deal. It was a pivotal moment when the field really shifted away from older ideas and firmly planted itself in a cognitive, mind-based understanding of what it truly means to read. But this all leaves us with one final, massive question. If every single reader is actively building their own unique mental model based on their own personal knowledge, how on earth can we possibly measure that? How do you create a standardized test for something that's a little bit different for every single person? And that is the core dilemma of assessment that Johnston goes on to explore. Thanks for digging into this with me.